Thank you very much for this kind and almost overwhelming introduction. So the DHD is just, I'm sorry to say, 160 members by now, but we can do better, so you're invited to join us. So again, thank you very much for this invitation. I will talk today about the future of digital publishing in the academia and consider the question whether the library is an agent of change. Agent of change is, in a way, reminiscent of a title by Elisabeth Eisenstein, which is called The Printing Press as an Agent of Change. Maybe you can think of that. Publishing digitally seems to be nothing special any longer, and lots of the publishers in the natural sciences, medicine, and technology have already changed their business model to a digital workflow. This comes with no surprise, as these disciplines have a closer affinity to data-centered research and used to publish in journals rather than in monographs. Comparatively small journal articles were more suitable in the beginning for the digital medium than comprehensive volumes. Above all, and this was one of the main reasons in the beginning, they could easily be printed out. Yet what happened in the initial phase of digital publishing is, when viewed from a later perspective, somewhat strange, because nobody seemed to having dared thinking the evident, namely that the internet may offer complete new opportunities to the scholar and has the potential to revolutionize the very principles of publishing. How could it be that the evident wasn't seen and that up to this day, traditional publication workflows are in place? As already noticed in the literature about the media change, there seemed to prevail an attitude that is very similar to the incunabular period of the printing era, where it was of utmost concern to imitate the manuscript. The Gutenberg Bible is a good example of that. Sorry. Here you can see on the left side a manuscript from about the same period and an imprint imitating the manuscript layout, the so-called Gutenberg Bible. The reason why the early adopters of the printing press sought to imitate the manuscript is not fully clear. Arguments that they attempted to deceive their customers or avoid conflicts with the copyists or stationers can easily be refuted. Fabre-Martin, in their book L'apparition du livre, point out that they simply had no other model they could copy and that it took almost 100 years, that is till the 17th century, during which the book evolved into its final form we know today. The argument by Fabre-Martin seems to be plausible, and yet there's another, more general point in it, namely that, as a rule, mankind is resistant to change. Kathleen has pointed out this as well, relating to the academy. Mankind tries to keep given ideas and paradigms as long as possible. And perhaps, in the case of the book, traditional ways of communication and displays are tied to still other ideas, deeply inveterated in the consciousness of man, that constitutes a stronghold against cultural change and serve to uphold the community's integrity by sharing a common cultural memory, as Jan Assmann would have put it. We should be aware that a good deal of books published in this particular early modern period had religious content, and that content had considerable impact on the form in which books were published. E.g., papal instruments were written on papyri till the 11th century, despite of the invention of the codex and wide usage of parchment since the 4th century after Christ. When considering the current media change, it is useful to be reminiscent of the history of the printed book, to perhaps better understand what is going on today, above all, that it may take time to enact changes in a publication system that, at least as the humanities are concerned, is considered part of the general cultural identity of the West. The librarian Uwe Jochum, who is well known for his little library history, sensed this at quite an early stage and harshly criticized the digital turn as being an assault on Western culture, leading finally to the end of the library and book culture we know. Yet, we all know changes will come, and we are well advised to actively contribute to building the new than simply letting it happen, according to the old Stoic saying that volentem fahat traunt, nulentem ducunt. I will translate this later. In my paper, a rather statement, I'm going to sketch the current academic publication practice and its stakeholders, and will try to propose some ideas about what might change and what roles libraries could play. For the time being, I see at least 4 important stakeholders. First, the scholar. Second, the publishing industry. Third, the academic institutions or society. And finally, and fourth, the library. All of these used to have different roles and interests in the publication process. The scholar as author is interested in disseminating the results of his research and making it most widely known. His or her interest is primarily not to make revenue, but to receive reputation and academic reward. I'm not talking here about people who earn a living by writing. This is a different case. Independent of this strive for reputation, every scholar is interested in using the best means to express his or her ideas or gleanings. The more exact, the more comprehensive, the more suitable, the better. The scholar, however, is not only author or creator of texts, but also its recipient. The easier he or she gets to information or publications, the better for his or her research. The publication industry, in turn, is interested in selling publications. It is, we have heard it, an economic enterprise. It provides particular services and products for money. The product they are selling is the digital journal or book, usually on subscription basis. Some publishers do have also an interest in the cultural side of the business. They are engaged in political, social, aesthetic, academic, or other activities they want to promulgate and foster by publications. But these publishers are more and more overruled by an ever-growing industry that is exclusively driven by commercial interests and tycoons that are buying out the market. We know this process in the sciences. It is connected with companies such as Elsevier, Blackwell, Wiley, Springer, and so forth. In the arts and humanities, a market that is much less attractive for commercial enterprises, the process is much slower, but even here, there are evidences that indicate that a concentration process is taking place. Librarians and some scholars are quickly ready to blame these practices as unethical and see the advent of the realm of the devil. And indeed, such thoughts aren't completely beside the point in view of Elsevier's annual profit turnover ratio of more than 30%, and journals such as Tetrahedron that costs more than $39,000 a year, while libraries are suffering from dramatic budgetary cuts. We have heard about this by Kathleen already. But what is wrong here is less the unhampered greed fueling the capitalist endeavor for ever greater profit, but the fact that there is no market that could outbalance deviant developments. If I don't like to buy a journal or book at Elsevier's, I can't simply buy it from another supplier who may charge less. The scholar is not interested in buying 150 kilos of books, but he needs this very book. And if the customer can't afford the Porsche, we cannot refer him or her to the VW. In fact, we have an implicit monopoly here as long as access to the content is restricted by a copyright law that allows a publisher to provide exclusive access to the journal or book. Selling is dependent on number and kind. The content in academic books is per se unique, or at least should be unique. Having only one work of its kind means that there can't be a market unless we agree that the academic community renounces to have these journals and books, thereby forcing the supplier to reduce prices or make their offers more attractive. If I can't afford a car, I have to use the train, or bicycle, or go by foot. Obviously, market means here to find new ways of publishing journals and books. With the advent of the digital, a new kind of mobility arrived, so to speak, and still there is a great reluctance of the academic community, or at least of the humanities, to adopt these. Again, we have to raise the question, what exactly academic publishers have to offer? Traditionally, we expect that they look for appropriate articles, organizing reviewers, do text correction, prepare the layout, and doing the marketing. A most important part is considered to be revising, including checking the facts, arguments, and logic, the form of presentation, structure, appropriateness of tone, understandability, wording, length of sentences, orthography, grammar, and layout. We observe, however, that publishers do not comply with these expectations any longer due to economical considerations. Most of the larger companies reduced revision and copy editing work considerably by transferring it to the author. Last but not least, the most important product publishers sell is reputation. For a long time, the name of publishing companies' houses stood for quality. Authors and libraries in Germany at least relied on their reputation. For example, publications by Niemeyer, Harrassowitz, Akademie Verlag, Oldenburg Verlag, etc. could be bought blindly. I stop here to come to the next stakeholder, academic institutions or societies. I subsume under them universities, disciplinary societies, Historikerverband, Germanistenverband, research associations such as the Max-Planck-Gesellschaft, and political and funding agencies such as the German Wissenschaftsrat and the German Research Foundation, or to give them the honor, the Mercator Foundation. In general, their interest is to enhance visibility and efficiency of research at the institutional and society level. Interesting enough, they used to be the driving force in recommending new publication methods, at least in Germany. An example of this is the Berlin Declaration on Open Access to Knowledge in the Sciences and Humanities, or several programs by the German Research Foundation. Another example could be seen in the strong interest of universities to measure impact of their own research. This is why a lot of them in Germany started setting up databases documenting their current research activities, focusing primarily on publications, so-called Forschungsinformationssysteme. I had a little bit trouble translating that. Research information systems, maybe. The field was up to now dominated by commercial companies, above all Elsevier, Thomson Reuters, or Macmillan publishers. But it's changing, and critique rises about the way impact is measured by them. In fact, one may wonder if it's sensible to let Elsevier measure the impact of its own journals. The aim for universities is to qualify for research money and support by the government and funding agencies. The issue of impact, therefore, is a quite important one. The humanities, in turn, are under pressure from university administrations as they demand publications in peer-reviewed journals. Otherwise, researchers in the field won't receive any support from the universities. The problem is that peer reviewing, as it is used in the sciences at least, is something profoundly alien to the arts and humanities. This is why the humanities are well advised to develop their own peer review procedures to match the requirements prescribed by universities and larger funding bodies. Devising new methods for quality measurement is, therefore, an important part of establishing new publication methods. For reasons of time, I will mention altmetrics only. Last but not least, I come to the library as a possible agent for advancing new publication models. At first sight, one may wonder why the library should take on a role that seemingly belongs to the publisher. Here it is important to recall the function of the library as an institution that not only makes accessible research products to a particular community, its patrons, but also has archival functions for society as a whole. Basically, this hasn't changed with the advent of electronic media, yet things became more difficult because of the intricate legal situation, at least in Germany. First of all, libraries are not allowed, I have to repeat that, libraries are not allowed to store digital media without the prior consent of the publisher. Not many people know that, actually. We are not allowed to store e-books without the consent of the publisher in Germany. There's no fair use in Germany, so it's different. This obviously endangers the basic functionality of a library as a long-term archive. Publishers often refer to the National Library in Frankfurt, which solely is entitled to store copyrighted electronic media thanks to a special law. Yet this relates to publications that appeared in Germany only. I will be very brief here. To fulfill their task, libraries have three options: negotiating with the publisher, hoping that the government introduces a particular law, the so-called Wissenschaftsschranke, or promoting open access and free licenses, e.g. Creative Commons. I will focus particularly on the latter. If libraries are responsible for long-term archiving of electronic media publications that are published open access under free licenses, then these kind of books are comparatively easy to handle with respect to the law. Creative Commons licenses are important as open access, we have heard this morning already, alone doesn't imply the right to archive the publication. Archiving sounds easy, but it isn't. It starts with the question of what is to be archived. Have a look at this page. What would you do? Do you archive this page, or would you archive the PDF of it? The HTML page? While the traditional book assumed a highly standardized form over the time, this is still lacking for electronic publications. Some may now argue that we've got PDF-A for that. To my opinion, however, PDF isn't a format that suits electronic media very well. If we look at the example I gave you, you will realize that there is something behind the various derivatives out of which you can generate an HTML or PDF view. At this very point, it becomes clear that we have to rethink the very essence of a publication. Publishing is no longer what you see, but what you can generate. Layout or surface is just part of an algorithm that is apt to create what you can see or even hear. What is behind the surface is the structure, and what constitutes the basis and condition of all you might obtain from electronic work lies in the very structure. Expressing the structure of a work is therefore of utmost importance, not only for long-term archival, but also for transforming a work to a human-readable form, a machine-readable index, or even a place in a semantic network. PDF-A is not able to express this. It imitates the print, and honestly, I don't know how the industry behind PDF was able to convince such a lot of librarians to believe that PDF is suitable for long-term archival or web publication. This is why libraries, or at least a few of them who see the relevance of it, struggle with the transformation of PDF into a structural representation for archiving purposes. Structural representation is usually realized by encoding a text in XML. What is at stake now is to establish standards for that kind of structural encoding. While the sciences have already agreed on standards, or on the other hand, publishers trying to enforce their standards, like this one by Elsevier, the arts and humanities haven't yet agreed on one for their publications. There is, however, a consensus on the TI as being used for editions, historical editions above all, or editions from the philology area, and there are a couple of journals at that are adopting the TI for encoding current publications as well. For instance, the journal by the TI itself, or the Digital Humanities Quarterly Journal, which is encoded in XML. I should mention here that structural markup should even be in the interest of the scholar, as it is more precise than layout. Using italics, for instance, is less explicit than determining the word as terminus technicus, or as a name, or as a maybe foreign word. This is why I recommended a culture of structural writing at another place. Collecting e-books and e-journals and converting them to a structural standard that is most suitable for long-term archival is only one side of the coin. In addition, libraries should enhance the publications by encoding entities. You see some examples of how one could annotate a page, so a typical page. This one is from the 19th century. In addition, libraries should enhance the publication by encoding entities according to standards for persons, such as the GND or the VIAF, or places such as the Getty Thesaurus or geonames. They are responsible for curating metadata and standards and functions as experts in the field. So they establish standards for texts, for entities, for bibliographic records and metadata, for persistent linking, web services and interfaces, and last but not least, standard semantic web. They don't create these standards, but they apply them, and they're experts for that kind of standards. They link, for instance, bibliographic entries to catalog records to allow for bibliometric applications. For instance, there is a record ID linked to a text, and when you do this consistently, you may see what kind of literature is being quoted, for instance. Or, of course, they could add semantic encoding, as some publishers in the sciences do already, for instance, PLOS. All of this belongs to the other task of the library, namely making accessible all media to their audiences, and what is still an important aim, bringing order to the mass of documents by building up collections of documents and research data and interconnecting them in a homogeneous virtual space. Traditionally, this took place in a very limited space. Usually, the library building or the university campus. With electronic media that have no copyright restrictions, things are changing fundamentally for the library and the kind of service they offer to their patrons. First of all, archiving and publishing may become the same, as it makes virtually no difference to archive and publish data and documents at the same time. For researchers willing to publish open access, the library seems to be an ideal place to go. Libraries will provide metadata to their writings, i.e. catalog and index the book. They will convert, ingest, and archive it. The research library is in close relation to actual research projects and ideally works together with scholars in the field. The library offers the entire infrastructure the scholar needs for his or her research. It is engaged in research projects exploring new ways of publications. Saying this, it becomes apparent that this new way of dealing with publications is blurring the line between the library and the publisher, since putting books or journals on the web is nothing else than publishing them. A scholar who intends to publish a book turns to his library to put it online. This sounds rather straightforward, but it has its intricacies, as publication works involves not only putting things online, but to ensure quality by a comprehensive revision process, organizing reviews, measuring impact, and all of the things I mentioned before. I attempt to wrap up by being aware that I was only able to scratch the surface. The media change opens up huge potentials to all stakeholders in the publication workflow, but also implies that basic practices have to change. For instance, a radical shift towards structural publishing and open access with open licenses. Publishers or library publishers have to reconsider their business model, because it is well known that open access doesn't mean that it's for free. Preparing and organizing publications cost money. Above all, the humanities, only for them I can speak here, have now the chance to build up a true alternative to the extant subscription and the traditional layout-related models. Libraries, universities, and most scholars have a strong interest in supporting a free publication circuit, and even publishers should seriously consider new kinds of services, for instance by offering encoding, revising, or reviewing services. Libraries can be an agent of change in that process insofar as they develop new attractive services for the patrons, ideally in bringing together the various stakeholders involved. It is hoped that they will be able to pursue their still necessary task to bring not only full-fledged structural encoding digital publications to their users, but also coming to grips with the maze and sometimes chaos of data and documents by leveraging new tools such as text mining techniques, bringing order to the letters we love. Thank you very much.